All right, we're going to do a review of the iPad generations here. On the far left, you see the original iPad, or the iPad 1. Next to that iPad, you'll see the iPad 3. Then starting in the white, the first one on the left, if you will, is the iPad 4. And the furthest one on the right is the newest iPad, the iPad Air. What's missing is the iPad 2. Don't have that one, have the rest of them. Immediately, the first thing you see is the size difference. You can see the original iPad. If you can't, you can see it was more of an oval shape at the bottom, so it was actually higher. I'm not sure if you can see that difference in the size, but for the rest of the iPads, it's for the most part a subtle change in the size, with the biggest change coming from the iPad 1 going to the 2, and then the iPad Air actually being a lot smaller than the rest of the iPads. The operating systems are different, obviously, for each one as they come out, as Apple typically releases a newer version of software to go with each, or pretty much for that year they come out with a new software baseline. So you can expect that change, but for the most part they operate the same. The first generation didn't have a camera at all, but the second generation, that's where they started the camera. The camera between the iPad 3 and the iPad 4 is probably the big jump between, and the actual jump was in the front, the camera in the front. The camera in the rear on all three of the iPads, I believe, or on the iPad 3, 4, and 5, or iPad Air, I believe the rear camera is 5 megapixels for all of them. But the iPad 3, the camera was less than 1 megapixel. But at the iPad 4 and iPad Air stage, the front camera is actually 1.2 megapixels. So you got a better camera in the front as well. The screen quality for the iPad 3, 4, and 5, or iPad Air is for the most part the same, 264, it's either 264 or 266 pixels per inch. You can kind of see the difference here on the iPad 1, but for the most part, I mean, that's what makes these things awesome, is the screen quality. With the start of the iPad 4, that's when they introduced the Lightning charger. It basically allowed the system to charge a lot faster. With the later or the older iPads from the 3 and older, it actually takes about 4 hours to completely charge it, and a little bit longer if the system, or if the product is actually just completely dead. With the Lightning charger for the 4 and the iPad Air, it takes about two hours, a little bit more than that, to actually charge from a complete standstill. So it was definitely a good change. I know it made a lot of people mad because it was a change in the pin, so you actually had to buy a new charger. You couldn't simply swap out with your older products. So I know that irritated a lot of people, but I think it was worth it. The processor for the iPad 3 is the A5 chip, and then for the iPad 4 is the A6, and then for the iPad Air it's the A7, and that's where they introduced the 64-bit capability. So that's really the big difference. I mean, for a lot of us, you won't actually see that change. And then the last part is for the iPad, or at the iPad 4 and higher, that's where they introduced the dual band support, meaning it could support 2.4 and or 5 gigahertz requirements. And that's about it. So there you go. 4 of the 5 iPads sitting next to each other. You can see the size differences. Again, a big jump, or big difference from the 1 going to the 3, even with the 2. My niece has a 2, and it's very similar to the 3. Then you can see the little difference between the 3 and the 4, and then you can see the big difference with the iPad Air and how much smaller it actually is.